Okay, so a lot has happened since I did my last live stream in the last couple of videos. A lot of sports happened, a lot of big sports news, but we're going to focus on a few things. Now, I've been watching a lot of the NRL in the last couple of weeks. I'm fully up to date with all the matches. Interesting changes on the rules. Obviously, the set restart rule, the one ref system at the moment, although I believe that's a temporary measure. I think that some of the rule changes have sped up the game. And I think Super League can learn, I think, a thing or two from how the NRL have A, restarted, and B, some of the temporary and permanent rule changes that have been brought into the NRL. And it's been quite fun to watch as well. Very, very good fun to watch. And the subscription for the Watch NRL, if you're outside the Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea, 130 quid a year. I did not watch Bournemouth Palace game yesterday. I wasn't actually at home. I went out for the day. I went for a barbecue, but the peak viewing figures were 3.9 million, so they were higher than anything that Sky or BT ever have had for viewership. And there are ongoing talks to keep more games on free-to-air TV going forward, but the TV companies are digging their heels in somewhat. I mean, you look at how much it costs just for the BT Sport package online. It's 25 quid a month. It's double what I'm paying for my NRL package. So again, you have to look at it. Yes, I got the NRL package because it's affordable. I'm not a big fan of paying through the nose for watching sport. I think it has to be more sustainable, and I worked out the mathematics. £12.50 a month over 25. I'm saving a lot of money. Plus, I get to watch every single game that the NRL plays. BT Sport only has a package of games. It does not show every single game. So, on the various leagues that it has rights for. So, you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm paying for a full package. I'm paying for part of the package. Legally streaming, this is the issue. This is where I think the subscription sports model needs to be more flexible, needs to be more financially viable. Because the reason why BT Sport, Sky Sports still have adverts on their broadcasts is they don't actually have enough subscribers paying the money for the product. So you think you're paying for a subscription to be ad free? It's not. It's not. And yes, you can say I could illegally stream it, and I have done in the past. But at the same time, now that I actually have the finance and I can justify spending some money, yeah, I found a website which is totally legal. It's actually an NRL website in conjunction with Fox Sports in Australia. And yeah, the quality is pretty good. You get to watch the full pre-match, post-match, half-time. If you miss the game, you can rewatch it in full without ads. So yes, there are services out there where you can watch sport, and it is cheaper. Online streaming is cheaper than subscription TV. And what we've seen is a lot of people on social media have been complaining about the fake crowd noise being pumped in. Now, we'll get to that in a minute because the NRL are allowing fans back in from round 8, which is 2 weeks' time. Fans will be allowed back into stadiums at 25% capacity. So in Australia and New Zealand, you already allow fans back in. So when the Warriors can go home back to New Zealand, we don't know when they are allowed to do that. I think that'll be next season. But if you're a Queensland, New South Wales or Canberra, you can play at your home ground from round 8 with fans in attendance. So that's interesting. I think the NRL have shown how a sports league can restart. And on the TV companies losing out on illegal streaming, get rid of the subscription model then, or make the subscription model far cheaper and more accessible. Because everything that I've seen points the finger of it's going up in price every year. The quality of production, with all the money that's been made by these TV companies, and they're now complaining about we want a rebate back for the football rights, but they're not asking for a rebate back on the rugby league rights. I find that really interesting. So if we come over here to the UK, forget about the NRL for a moment, I'll get on to some of the other issues that have been going on, especially in the last few days. It's been mental in North America when it comes to players and coaches and training staff testing positive for the virus, and how that affects restarting professional sport in the US and Canada, and the hub city or hub state kind of theory that various sports leagues are going for. The reason why TV companies are actually spending so much money trying to shut down these illegal streams, but if they actually look at their pricing and the product they are already putting out for people the fans to consume. The pay-per-view model on top of a subscription is hopelessly flawed because you're already paying through the nose for the subscription. Then you get a pay-per-view, and that's double. It's just it's all greed. And the TV companies are now on the back foot because there is a call for more free-to-air professional sport. There is a call for more access to professional sport, etc., etc. So the trend is changing, and I think it would have been a matter of time anyway before this happened. It would have been, but this has sped up the process. Fans have finally said enough's enough. Ticket prices keep going up. The salaries keep going up. Yeah, I think it's you have to look at it. And if I'm going back to the Australian model, okay, so New Zealand have already fully reopened and they've packed out every stadium so far, which looks good for the future of Super Rugby and possibly the A-League going forward and cricket and things like that. It looks good in New Zealand, but bearing in mind New Zealand is a country of 5 million people and a third of them live on the North Island or in 2 cities. So you take the 2 biggest cities out of New Zealand, it's a very rural country, hence why New Zealand's got a very low infection rate. And the cities are very well planned in New Zealand as well. It's just an interesting place that has got it right. Australia, they've said, yeah, from round 8 in the NRL, and that will be, I think, I think it'll be 4 for the AFL. Fans will be allowed back into stadiums at a 25 to 35% capacity, depending on the stadium and the configuration of the stadium. And that is a positive move because they've only been using 3 or 4 stadiums that are biosecure as hubs. And of course, the New Zealand Warriors can't play in New Zealand at the moment because they haven't fully reopened the air bridge and the sea bridge between New Zealand and Australia to the general public travelling. So I would think that the New Zealand Warriors will probably be playing the rest of the season in Australia. Next season, they can probably return home. But on the side of why can't they let people wear masks on the stands, I think it depends completely on the country. And I'll talk about the US and Canada and what's going on with the Tampa Bay Lightning shutting down pretty much. They've had to shut their training facility. Austin Matthews testing positive. A whole university collegiate American football team testing positive. There's been several NFL players, Major League Baseball. So when you're looking at the hub city or the hub state narrative that they're coming out with in the US and Canada, it's interesting. Well, if you talk about like population density, a lot of the Australians, I think 8% live on the east coast between Brisbane and Melbourne. 8% of the population. You've got Adelaide and you've got Perth and you've got Darwin, Alice Springs, and a few other cities dotted around. But for the most part, it's between Melbourne all the way up to Brisbane. That's where the majority of the Australians live. It's a very concentrated area of population in the country. But the Australian sporting side of things, they've showed a pathway back. Now, go over to, oh, it's raining when it's not meant to. That's beautiful. That's stunning. Not meant to rain. If we go over to North America in the last few days, obviously we've had the issues with Major League Baseball and the players and the owners and the league not coming to an agreement to restart, sort out paid wage deferrals, the fact they have a lack of salary cap. And now players are testing positive in the locations that they want to use as the hub locations in Arizona and Florida. So the Major League Baseball are really on the back foot. The Tampa Bay Lightning have admitted, I think, 5 players and coaching staff have tested positive. Austin Matthews, Toronto Maple Leafs, has tested positive. And that raises questions about, okay, we're at phase 2 for the NHL and the NBA. They're in phase 2. They're already preparing to prepare their arenas, another hub city plan to restart. Major League Soccer obviously plans to have this tournament in Florida where a lot of cases have suddenly spiked on a second spike. So, it is chucking down now. Oh, beautiful. I came in just in time. So on the restart of sport, it's varying from location to location and league to league. NASCAR still doesn't have fans at the racetracks. I think, well, not everyone's a fan of NASCAR and everything like that, and there's a bit of controversy surrounding NASCAR at the moment. The way NASCAR have dealt with their restart and their restart plan, they've done pretty good. They've done pretty good considering. But motorsport, I think, is an easier sport or easier type of sport to restart. Football, we've seen the Premier League restart. In the first game back, the Hawkeye failed. And I'm going to discuss this. So the ball was clearly over the line. The goalkeeper has carried the ball over the line. Now, what is interesting is two things. One, the VAR and the Hawkeye is there to assist the officials, not make the decisions for them, assist them. You still have a referee and two linesmen. And at which point you have to ask yourself, have the officials become too reliant on the tech? Because we are one of the only few countries in the world that have fully professional referees in football. And the refereeing standards need to be looked at. And the fact that the system passed before the game started. Oh, this is what I mean. So because it hasn't buzzed on his little wristwatch, he has decided not to call it a goal. Even though every other player around the league who's watching at home is going, well, that's crossed the line. This is the reason why we had the video assistant and the Hawkeye brought in, and it's worked up to this point. This is the first failure of the Hawkeye system. And at the end of the day, let's say Aston Villa avoid relegation and Sheffield United miss out on Europe because of that draw. You are going to see a lot of complaints from other teams in the league. Now, yes, you're judged on a whole league season. You're judged on what you do every game. But that would have been the winning goal. That's 3 points for Sheffield United, who've lost today, by the way, 3-0. But it will come back to that failure of technology and the failure of the referee to make a decision. You have a linesman. The excuses given are shambolic. And this is the second time. Oh, yeah, Sheffield got back, but that's irrelevant what they've lost today. You have to expect wins and losses and everything over a whole season. But if they miss out, let's say, by 2 points or goal difference or a point when it comes to getting into Europe, and if Aston Villa escape by a point, they will look at that game and that particular incident at that time in the first half and go, well, that has actually defined the season. Even though you have to judge on the full schedule, the full season, you can look at that moment and go, well, the officials are now far too reliant on the tech, and then they're now not willing to make decisions. Oh, that rain. Where does that rain come from? It's not going to rain today. Go away. You didn't rain yesterday. Just stop. So, yes, they've lost today. You take that into context. But when it comes down to it, if the season comes down to a point, goal difference, wins, goals against, the whole where they can break it down if there's a tie going into, breaking down who qualifies for Europe or who qualifies for the Champions League or Europa League, and that game is brought up. It's going to be interesting. And Sheffield United are a very, very decent team. Aston Villa, if they escape relegation because of that draw, which could prove crucial, the other teams around them will be like, well, we're equal on goal difference or points, and they'll be going, well, that's cost us. Even though over a whole season you've got to put performances to deserve to remain in the league or finish where you finish. But it does show that the weakness of the system is that the officials, the on-field officials, have become far too reliant on the tech. And when the tech goes wrong, they make bad decisions. So we have to look at officiating standards. Again, that's been brought into question. And it is very, very interesting to note that not a single English referee went to the last World Cup. Just remember that. Not a single referee went to the last World Cup in 2018 from England. Not a single linesman. And that is something to remember as well. And when you look at the use of tech, it is there to assist, not make the decisions for. And I think this is where the implementation of VAR and Hawkeye has gone wrong. This is where, when the World Cup in 2018, we'd used Hawkeye in 2014 to great success. It worked. There was a few teething issues, but it pretty much in principle worked. The last 2 years, we have taken backward step after backward step with the implementation and use of this technology. And it is amazing to me that other sports are so far ahead when it comes to video assistant referees or using technology to help the on-field or the on-ice or the umpires or whatever sport it is make the decisions correctly and come to the decision. Why is it football, the wealthiest sport in the world, can't implement basic tech? It's basic tech, really. It's some video cameras and a sensor. It's pretty basic tech. And they did the full pre-match test, and it said it worked. But when you actually need it to work, it failed suspiciously. So yes, there are questions to be asked of the systems that are in place. There are questions to be asked of where we go. 4-3-3 variations. Formations. Well, it's up to how a team is built to play. I think the 4-3-3 is the most exciting formation you have, personally. It means it's a brilliant counter-attacking style of football, but it only really is truly effective, if you can get the goals out of it and get the accuracy in scoring, because you may be relying on 30% possession of the ball with that formation. The 4-4-2 some people say it's outdated. It actually can work quite effectively against a 4-3-3 because you do choke out that midfield. And if you are having a midfield battle, and that's where the game is won and lost, 4-5-1. I mean, there's all these various formations out there, and they've all been very successful. So I think it comes down to the manager, the style of play, the style of players he has, and other players that are in that squad willing to buy into this system. Does it suit the system, suit the players, and vice versa? You can say the 4-3-3, I think, at the moment seems to be the best way to play. But in 5 years' time, it may not. Other managers may have figured out a way to nullify a 4-3-3 counter-attack, fast-paced, lack of possession football. It just seems that in the last couple of years, that's where titles have gone, is teams that seem to set up as standard when they're on the field, when their lineup's named in a 4-3-3 formation. But we may see a return to the roving sweeper role. There are some players who actually can play a deep line midfield or deep line centre-back role quite well and distribute the ball. There are players who currently are sort of playing out of a natural position for them, and in a formation like a 4-3-3 or a 4-5-1 or whatever it may be, that is too rigid for them, and they can't do that roving deep midfield, deep sweeper role where they can still also counter-attack with the ball and add an extra midfielder and also drop back and add an extra centre-back. So the 4-3-3, I think, at the moment seems to be the most successful form of how to play a game, but you've got to have flexibility. And if an opposition team have set up in a way that nullifies a 4-3-3 counter-attack or possession style 4-3-3, you've got to have flexibility and have a backup plan to alternate things tactically to then get round the opposition, because otherwise, you're just not going to be successful. A 4-3-3 counter-attack doesn't work with possession, ironically. This is where England go wrong a lot of the time. They just have too much possession for the formation they have. England, for example, under Gareth Southgate, are more effective when they don't have a lot of the ball, when they're attacking at pace and allowed to attack and just go in a 4-3-3 where the midfield three can swap with the front three, for example, and the front three can drop back a little bit and then add that extra bit of pace going forward. So really it's a 4-6. But again, you have to adapt the formation to suit the needs, of the conditions, because the conditions may not be conducive to playing that style of football. It may be, as we've just seen now, changeable. You may have a heavy pitch. You could have, a very dry pitch, very quick pitch. You have to adapt your formation sometimes to the conditions, not necessarily the team you're playing. That's what I was always taught. You have to adapt to every circumstance. On the Newcastle takeover, we've heard not a lot in recent days. That has started to drag now. Yes, you could say the pandemic and the lockdown and just trying to get Project Restart going has had something to do with that. Obviously, the background with the TV piracy allegations and the World Trade Organization getting involved and a whole host of other issues taking place are dragging it. I think it goes ahead. I think it will get put through eventually, but the length of time it is taking is frustrating. I can completely understand that. And we have been here before with Mike Ashley with many a takeover bid put in that has not got this far, I will admit. This is the furthest we've got with a takeover proposal for this club. But I think the length of time taking is raising a lot of concerns about, at the end of the day, firstly, Newcastle are still in the FA Cup and they've had a good win today. So Steve Bruce has got a bit of confidence, and the FA Cup does restart soon. They want to get that completed by the beginning of August. And they could be a dark horse for the FA Cup. And if they win silverware, to then sack a manager and replace him with someone else is not going to be a good look. And Steve Bruce is not everyone's cup of tea. I completely understand that. He's not my favourite cup of tea. But he is doing quite a decent job with very limited resources, with a club that's currently going through a protracted takeover, and it is protracted. And this has got to be quite, damaging, for the dressing room, because you've got a manager there whose job is now up in the air. Will the new owners want to keep him around until, let's say, Pochettino comes in? Will they give him the funds when the transfer market reopens to rebuild the squad? His job is now no longer secure. I mean, the league position is secure, and they are still in a cup competition, and they've had a good win today. But the lack of certainty over the manager's position will transcend to the players, and then the players themselves. Will these new owners be willing to give them wage increases? Will these new owners be willing to, invest in? Are they actually going to bring, the promises in of investment in infrastructure in the club? That's something else to consider. The quality of the Bundesliga versus the Premier League, is there a clear difference in quality or just a difference of style? I think it's more the club structures are the major difference. It's not really the quality or the style, because Munich Bayern have been pretty dominant for the better part of a decade, and that is a problem with the Bundesliga. Is only a handful of teams other than Bayern have won it in the last 15 years, and that is an issue that needs to be looked at. Is the depth of quality. The style. It's more the style of how the clubs are structured and run. There's a lot more fan involvement in the league. There's a bigger dependence on homegrown talent. In Germany, they completely ripped up club structures and player development after Euro 2000. They were like, this is not good enough. They looked at the Euro 2000 mess, and that was their worst tournament in a very long time for the Germans. And within 2 years of ripping up and going, right, we're not happy with where we are. We finished bottom in our group in Euro 2000. We're not happy where we are. We've struggled in this tournament. Within 2 years, they're in a World Cup final. And they've been consistent since then. They've been pretty solid since 2002 until the last World Cup. So that's 2 decades of consistency. And they looked at the issues and they said, right, the Bundesliga, that we are having falling numbers of German-born or German-trained players. The style of football we're playing has got to change. The player development, a whole host of things. So the last 20 years, German football has changed dramatically from where it was. They did look at how they develop players. They did look at youth academies. They did look at club structures, and they completely changed the whole lot. They went back to the drawing board and went through a period in the early 2000s where they looked at the percentage of players playing that could play for the German national team in the German league system. I mean, that's not high enough. It's now nearly 60%, 70%. And then you look at it now, and you look at any average Bundesliga starting squad, and 7 to 8 average of the starting 11 are German or eligible to play for Germany. Regardless of the amount of money that's got to be distributed, you look at the starting 11s of Bundesliga and second-tier teams. You look at, are these players eligible to play for Germany? And 70% can play for Germany. Go to the Premier League. Yes, there's more money. There's a bigger TV deal. That's a bigger product. It's a bigger league, ironically. It's got more teams in the league. Look at the Premier League. And Huddersfield did get a lot of money for basically being not. This is the problem with the basically the prize money. It rewards failure massively. Rewards failure. It says you can be shit and you can get tens of millions of pounds. A lot of money. Parachute payments do actually reward failure massively. But the way finances are structured now, you win or you lose. There is no stability, I think. Very few clubs are stably run. And with the current situation, with what we've seen in the last 3-4 months, if a team gets relegated now, they are had it. Champions League predictions, we'll have to see how they format the tournament. We'll have to see how they format the rest of the competition. And the same for the Europa League. We're going to have to see how they completely format and play it out in August. We've got another 2 months to wait yet. And we'll have to see what happens. I have no predictions. I personally have, my interest in football has completely dropped off. The way the furloughing of staff was handled by clubs, the way players, clubs and the PFA have been at loggerheads over wage deferrals or wage cuts, and the advice given by the PFA to the players, and then individual playing squads and individual clubs took it upon themselves to come to mutual agreements across Europe. This is not just in England or Scotland. To come to agreements is troubling. There seems to be no unified purpose. And now with all these protests, the civil rights kind of protests, and then now political slogans being placed upon jerseys, and I understand that the poppy argument that was FIFA, that wasn't the FA. And then you look at the FA's code of conduct and its rule book. Technically, what they've just done is in contravention to their rule book, ironically. There's a whole host of things going on. It's a PR exercise. It's a PR exercise. The way football as a sport, amongst many sports, has handled the last 3 or 4 months has been shambolic. There has been no universal kind of collective, let's get through this. It's been UEFA trying to force all the seasons to finish before they look at the Champions League, Europa League. Then they give out a statement saying it's indefinitely suspended. Then they're going to say we're going to try and play it in August. Yeah, the footballing governing bodies have not dealt with the situation. Great. TV companies haven't won themselves any new fans. The players and the clubs, in fact, the whole structures are up for debate because it shows the haves and have-nots. Macclesfield have been deducted loads of points. Survive somehow. Stevenage get relegated out of the Football League. Tranmere are considering legal action against the points per game decision to relegate them from League One. Then you have issues with Peterborough missing out of the playoffs because of points per game, and only the Championship and the Premier League restarting in England. The Scottish League system that dragged on. Hearts are considering further action as well. They put forward a proposal to restructure the Scottish League system going forward for a couple of years, if not permanently. It's I try and keep politics off the channel as much as possible, but the fact that politics has seeped itself into professional, independent sport that is an Olympic sport is concerning, massively concerning. And it's the way it's been done. It's insidious. Sport is meant to bring people together, not divide them more. And from what I've seen on social media, the football fandom seems to be more right wing than the media, which is kind of worrying. I'll talk about Arsenal in a short while. I think Arsenal is an interesting case because they're currently 10th. That's an interesting case, is Arsenal. On the side of how football dealt with things and people's interest. Yeah, I'm more interested in other sports. Other sports have shown themselves more capable of dealing with the crisis. Other sports have come up with plans of action far quicker and have had better dialogue with their players, with their constitutional clubs or sporting bodies. And European football has dealt with things really badly. And you can see it on social media, and you see it on comment threads on Reddit. You go online, you look at the mainstream sports websites that allow people to post comments. You see the reaction is very divided, and you see that the last 3.5 months, or however long we've had off since the last games were played before football restarted, there is a clear divide with how things have been handled and how the footballing authorities have really been haphazard, ad hoc doing this. It doesn't seem to be that there's any universal plan amongst all the European FAs. Some leagues have suspended, some leagues have called the season, some leagues have just awarded titles, other leagues have tried to restart. And UEFA, as the governing body above the regional FAs, have said, this is our plan, we're going to change the plan constantly. The amount of money involved, and the lower leagues, I mean, if Huddersfield's chairman has come out and said about 50 to 60 clubs could go out of business, that's 2/3 of the professional clubs in the Football League and the Premier League gone by next season. That's not a structure that is sustainable. And part of the problem is TV deal. TV deal is heavily weighted to one league, and then it rewards failure. And the EFL haven't covered themselves in glory at all over the last couple of years. The fact that Bury went out of business before this crisis is concerning. The fact that other clubs are now saying we're going to go out of business, not because we've got bad ownership, but the system itself is flawed and is unsustainable. And then leagues taking it upon themselves to say we don't think we can financially survive restarting without fans or without a TV deal negotiated. But the TV companies are saying, no, you're paying us money back. We want a rebate. This is not what we paid for. It shows the amount of power the TV companies have over professional and semi-professional sport. They call the tune, not the governing bodies, it seems. Sky and BT, and to a certain extent Amazon, are basically calling the tune about when sport restarts, how it restarts, and it's got to be to their terms, which is wrong. What I think's gone wrong with Arsenal, a whole host of reasons. Arsenal, where they are. I think Wenger did stay too long. Yes, he brought 3 more FA Cups to the Emirates, the first silverware at the Emirates since they moved there. But I do think the Wenger era possibly should have ended earlier. Recruitment has been a problem, massive problem, with Arsenal over the last, I'm going to say 15 years. Even when they were successful in the first half of Wenger's time in charge, I think recruitment's been a massive issue. I think the fact they spent so long paying off the debt on the stadium, paying off the stadium, and being mediocre, they were solid but not outstanding. And the style of play that they play doesn't suit the players they have. They've got no one with any real spite in them. You've got no real box-to-box midfielder who just tackle all day. You haven't got a Roy Keane, you haven't got a Vieira, you haven't got a Makelele type player. You need that. It doesn't matter what formation you play. You need 1 or 2 of those players who will bully the opposition a little bit and leave a mark in a tackle. David Luiz is not a centre back. He's a deep lying roving midfielder, sweeper, as I mentioned earlier. That's the type of player who doesn't fit the modern footballing system, who can sit deep and then counter attack from deep, drop back and make yourself and give you an extra midfielder or an extra defender in times of defence, but in attack gives you an extra passing and attacking threat. And he wasn't that bad at Chelsea, or PSG, or Brazil for that matter. He's not that bad a player. Something's going on at Arsenal where the morale is just rock bottom. The players don't seem to want to play for the club. Mikel Arteta is in a position where it's his first managerial gig at senior level, and it's not panning out how he would like it to pan out. Let's be brutally honest about what we're seeing. We're seeing a guy who's been thrown at the deep end. The previous manager got them to a cup final, which they were humiliated in. The previous manager before that was there too long. And admittedly, he brought more silverware to the club, but he was there too long. The club was stagnating and then declining. And a lot of it is to do with the ownership and recruitment and player development. Player development is another cause of concern at Arsenal. They've got, it is a cause of concern going forward. But you have to. Is the dressing room divided between groups of players who don't like each other, don't talk to each other? Is there a communication issue? Are there too many overseas players? Most likely. This is Arsenal. They heavily rely on overseas talent rather than homegrown. And I think this is what's holding them back as well. You look at every other team in the Premier League, their youth academies are producing higher quality homegrown players. And that's something I think that's going to have to be encouraged going forward, coming out of this crisis and going forward. Top 3 national teams. Oh God, I've really tuned out of football the last couple of weeks. I've not really paid any interest in the Bundesliga or La Liga or Serie A or even the Premier League or Championship returning. I haven't really gone to myself, I'm going to watch that. 3 best national teams for success or for projected success. Because yes, England's one of the younger squads out there, from what Gareth Southgate keeps choosing. On the best run league in the world when it comes to sport, I think the AFL, would for me be in Australia would possibly be the best run league in the world. It has occasionally the odd controversial player or controversial coach, whatever. But I think the AFL possibly for me is the best run professional sports league in the world, by some margin. That's from watching sport and looking at it and how the sports run. I think the AFL for me possibly would be the best run professional sports league in the world. I think you look at Super League or the NRL and Rugby League, they've got problems. You look at Super Rugby, that's a mess. Premiership Rugby's a mess. Top 14 in France, that's unsustainable business model. That can't continue with our money in that. The Pro League, Rugby Union, oh dear, that cannot be sustained either. Um, on the side of the best league in the world, I think the AFL, I think, is the best run sports league in the world right now. It's dealt with the pandemic very, very well. We had a good communication with the Australian government. It truly is a national league in Australia, and it's got a good reserve grade kind of second tier, where all the territories and states in Australia also have a Aussie rules league system. So there's always a good production line of players. It's played in every state and territory in Australia. Schools and universities have Aussie rules teams on their sporting courses. On the top three national teams, I think the German system means they're always going to be competitive. Percentage of German players playing in the Bundesliga eligible for selection, and their production of talent has been continuous for 20 years. Other than that, I think, yes, the England setup now has a younger look to it, and we are starting to develop more youngsters, but are they of the quality of the teams that we've had in the past, and the quality of player that this country has produced over the last 50, 60 years? That is the question to ask. Um, uh, it's a difficult one. I think projected success is something, because you're assuming this team is going to. You're assuming sport is so unpredictable. And I say that because the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup last year when they were bottom of the NHL, 31st and last on January the 1st. So Vegas Golden Knights, their first season, make a Stanley Cup run. I'm a massive ice hockey fan, as you know. So to predict anything and project success is on pure talent. Yeah, you can project success based on projected talent, and then injuries, suspensions, bad form. It makes things difficult to project ahead. Um, that is a very grey area. But if you want to look at projected restarts of sports, it's getting interesting. Now, we know sport is starting to get restarted in Europe. It has restarted down in Australia and New Zealand. Let's have a look at North America. Getting really interesting. So NASCAR has restarted. It's good. I like NASCAR. I like motorsport. It's nice to see cars going around in an oval. Occasionally road circuits as well, but it is nice to see that NASCAR has restarted. The NHL and NBA share arenas. Now, what's happened this week, as I said, is players have tested positive for the virus, and coaching staff, backroom staff, have tested positive for the virus. But we are in phase 2 of the NHL. Now, the NHL have been actually very good, I think, in communicating where they're at with their plans to restart and their plans to reconfigure the playoff structure so they can at least get this season done, because they are mindful of a TV deal coming up, Seattle entering the league next year, collective bargaining agreement being up. They're mindful of a lot of things that are coming in the next year or two that will have massive financial consequences for that league. The NBA, again, shares buildings and training facilities with the NHL in arena space. That they are also, planning to obviously come back within the next month or so to at least get into training camp. But these positive tests are a concern. Now, there's the Hub City plan. Now, the NHL has been very, very clear that that is the best way to restart their league. And as time continues, it looks more likely that Canadian cities could ironically be the hub cities, and they are looking at quarantine rules and border crossings and how that's going to affect things. But the NHL has a plan. The NBA has a plan. The Major League Soccer has come up with this 54-game World Cup style knockout tournament in Orlando. So the MLS can play out this season. Admittedly, it will have an asterisk and it will be different. But that is an interesting one. And then you look at Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is in a right situation right now. Players and the owners of the teams are at war with each other. They have no salary cap. They also have a collective bargaining agreement that is up for renewal in the next 12 months. They have no plan for Project Restart. They can't even get to the negotiating table to work out a plan where they can complete this season they haven't got to that stage yet, and players are testing positive. And in the 2 states where they want to use as hub locations, cases are rising. So Major League Baseball is in a real serious situation. Now, this is a sport and a league that between 1972 and 1995 had eight player strikes, lockouts, or similar form of protest or labour stoppage. But some of them lasted a few days, some lasted months. So if you look at the amount of time Major League Baseball has lost since 1972 to a variety of issues when no games were played, it's a lot. And baseball has to be looking at the other sports and how they're going to be restarting in baseball season. The NHL should be done by now. The NBA should be done by now. This is baseball's time to be the major sport on US TV. And it's going to be competing against Major League Soccer, the NHL, and the NBA if it restarts. So if there's going to be this labour unrest where players and owners aren't willing to negotiate over salaries and costs and hub cities and restarting, fans will switch off. Fans will look for some form of sports entertainment, even if it's a sport they've never watched before. Could be Major League Rugby for all we know, and go, oh, I'll give that a watch. And this is crucial when you have a collective bargaining agreement coming and no salary cap. If you're going to lose money, and now the league can afford to shut down for a year, but when it reopens and restarts, other leagues have gained a lot of ground in the markets that baseball is in, and it could find itself more difficult to re-establish itself and get fans back into stadiums when fans are allowed to go back into arenas. So it's going to be interesting to see how baseball deals with the situation, but nothing positive seems to have happened yet. And it is interesting that crisis comes along. Other sports which have collective bargaining agreements coming up are working together with their players' union and the league to come to solutions to the problem. Baseball, the last 25 years, they've been putting band-aids on the situation. So the lack of salary cap is a big problem for baseball. Now, I'm not a baseball fan, but I have friends who are. So they've got no baseball to watch. They've got no baseball to consume. I mean, Christ, we're going to have a London series right now. Yes, the second batch of London series games are going to be played this summer. Not happening, which has cost Major League Baseball its share of the sports market in Europe, because European sports have restarted and Major League Baseball hasn't. So whoever the commissioner's office and the league office and the MLBPA and the MLB itself, they're at war with each other. And this has been simmering with Major League Baseball for 25 years. The fact we've had other scandals as well within baseball in that time, including the aftermath of the steroid scandal, the juice in the ball, the Astros and Red Sox buzzer scandal in the last 12 months, is a problem. And yes, we'll see what happens in that regard. In rugby union news, obviously the rugby premiership has reduced the salary cap. Players aren't happy about it. And again, there's issues with how they're going to restart rugby union. Some sports are dealing with. So when you say what's the best league in the world, or what's the best run sport, I'm still going to say Aussie rules. And ironically, even though the NRL has obviously got its issues, they've managed to restart. Fans are now going to be allowed back into stadiums. You know, they've tweaked the rules to make the game quicker and more exciting. And it's a better product now than what it was before lockdown. I'm actually enjoying watching the NRL now more than I was before. I'm already a massive fan of the sport, so I think the NRL have come up with a good idea there with the set restart rule and speeding up the game. I do think the second referee has to return because there are calls being missed. That's going to happen though in any game, any sport that relies on human officiating. There will be human error, but I have seen one or two calls that forward passes, bit of foul play that have been missed. If you have that second referee, there isn't missed. So whether they bring back the second ref at any point, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, they've got to keep enough officials fit and ready to go in case the virus takes one out. But we'll have to wait and see on the NRL front on that point. Obviously, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury have signed a two-match season. That's going to be interesting. Two fights or three fights with the Hearns. So that's going to be interesting when Fury Joshua that head-to-head takes place. Do I think there'll be any EIHL this season? Christ, as a Bracknell Bees fan, we're not even sure if our team's going to be able to play ever again with the issues with Bracknell Ice Rink and the John Knight Leisure Sport Complex. EIHL, I think ice hockey will probably be one of the best sports to adapt to return to some kind of normality. Do I think there's going to be a season? This will be the off season anyway for ice hockey. So they have time to prepare a contingency plan, and they should be. Will they? This I could not tell you. There's enough issues with the National League structure, with Basingstoke and Bracknell possibly not even being able to have arenas to play in. They have teams ready to go, no arenas to play in. So we find out in the next couple of weeks what's going on with the Bracknell Ice Rink, whether there's a solution found where it can stay open and get the refurbs it needs. Basingstoke's rink's falling down, and we don't know what's going to happen there. On the EIHL side of things, as far as I know, they obviously, the various ice hockey leagues in Europe said we're not going to have playoffs. We're ending our seasons now, and we'll go into an extended off season. And the seasons aren't due to restart till September, October anyway. We're only in June, so it does allow time for more contingency planning to be put in place. And by the time the seasons are due to start, restrictions, I would believe, would be a lot less than they are now. But financially, ice hockey in the UK is going to get hammered. I have no doubt on that. Ice hockey in the UK is going to absolutely hammered financially. And we always seem to go from at the end of each season, we lurch from one crisis to the next. We go from crisis to crisis in British ice hockey. There's no stability. The growth of the sport has been amazing in the last 5-6 years, but the concerns that I have is the lack of stability and the lack of planning at times, and it always seems to be knee-jerk reactions and panicky. And I couldn't tell you. I think it's probably the best place sport to return on a playing standpoint, but on a financial standpoint, I think it could be quite bad. But I'm not an expert when it comes to science, medical science. I'm not an expert. I couldn't tell you the ins and outs of how the social distancing for fans would work, or I think it was mentioned earlier. Why don't we wear face masks in public? Have you seen the heat and humidity outside? That's horrible. If you are an asthmatic and you have to go to work in a face mask, you are going to be in trouble. On the side of sport returning, I mean, we lurch from one cry on the ice hockey. I'm a Bracknell Bees fan. We don't even know if we're going to have an arena to play in anymore. Basingstoke aren't even sure if they're going to have an arena to play in anymore. Yes, the council seem to have got involved, and yes, the local MPs have got involved, but we're not sure if we're going to have an arena to play games in. So this is the problem with how the sport, the English Ice Hockey Association, seems to run things, and it's a mess. The Edinburgh Capitals going out of business a couple of years ago. The whole Stingrays, Newcastle Vipers. I mean, our teams I could name that no longer exist. The amount of arenas that have had problems or no longer exist. The sport doesn't have stability. And I think that's what holds it back, and that's why it's classed as a minority sport in this country, is it doesn't have the stability and good governance. I think that's the best way to describe how the sport is run in this country. It's the fans are there, players are there. Needs a better TV deal, better media coverage, and it needs more stability, be it in governance, rink ownership, arena management, facilities. These are long-term issues that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years that have never really been fully fixed. But then you look at other sports like football, and they're in crisis. And this pandemic has shown up the flaws in the sporting systems that we have, and show how unsustainable the system is. I think football's money bubble would have burst within the next 5-10 years anyway. I have no doubt on that. I have no doubt that the situation football finds itself in now, where clubs are facing going out of business in large numbers, that I think would have been 5-10 years down the line. It's just moved forward a bit. And what we've seen in the last 3-4 months has highlighted what the Premier League TV deal or you know, Premiership rugby league, the issues that are there have been masked to a certain extent by the TV deals in place that actually don't help the sport that they claim to. They hold the sport to ransom. This is where I'm not a big fan of Sky or BT Sport, because they're now calling the tune about when football restarts, how football restarts, and they're still demanding money back, which I think is wrong, because the season looks like it's going to be completed, the football season, but it's not the product they paid for. So they're pumping fake crowd noise in, which people don't like, and they want a way to turn off. And the free-to-air viewing figures are higher than subscription. So, and for, I think, was it Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, two teams that don't have massive supporter bases, getting 3.9 million people to watch says neutrals want to watch the game. It's accessible, you're going to watch it. You're going to get more people interested. But as we saw with the Bundesliga restarting, the first 2 weeks Bundesliga been back on, fans went nuts for it. And then they realised, it's going to be Munich's again, we'll switch off. And they switched off in droves off BT Sport. So you'll see a sudden peak, and then the interest will drop away again, because it's not as accessible. And people are saying they're cancelling subscriptions. They're not willing to pay through the nose. When you look at it in a nutshell, the average worker is not earning as much money as they were in real terms that they were pre-2008. This crisis has meant that the economy has shrunk by 20% in a month, officially. It's a quarter of the economy or a fifth of the economy wiped off in a month. People ain't going to have the money to pay for all these sports subscriptions. Sports themselves need to wean themselves off these big TV deals and become more sustainable. The players need to take wage cuts at the top level. The footballers, the rugby players, some of the cricketers, some of the motorsport, they're going to need to get paid less for a decade to allow sports to survive. We need to look at grassroots sports funding at schools, youth and amateur grassroots level sport across the board, because there's too much focus put on the top level and not enough focus, I don't believe, on the grassroots, the infrastructure for grassroots, the facilities for grassroots, to enable the superstars to sustain their wages. And it's the same with ice hockey. We need to look at facilities. If Bracknell Ice Rink, the John Knight Group, had actually looked after the place for the last 20 years, we wouldn't be in the situation now where it basically needs to completely rebuilding. They're whinging about having to spend $500,000 on the ice plant machinery, when before 2008 they could have done this, upgraded it for a hell of a lot less money. And in the off season, in a few weeks, they're now trying to basically deny, they've allowed lack of maintenance to catch up with them, and they've been caught out. And now thousands of people in my local community, which have used that facility for 33 years, are wanting the council to get involved. And the council here where I live have proven they can look after public facilities, the sports centre. We've got a coral reef like Waterworld. We've got an outdoor thing called the Lookout. The local council have proven themselves for the best part of 2 decades more than capable, on small budgets, of maintaining public areas for tourism and recreation. So we have to look at grassroots funding of sports facilities for recreational sport. We have to look at facilities in general for semi-professional to professional sport at the lower levels of wealth. So this is where I think, do I think there'll be an ice hockey season? I'm hopeful. How many teams will be able to compete in the various leagues in this country, from the EIHL to the National League to the real amateur leagues? I don't know. I could not tell you. I have one of my work colleagues, my friend Dave. He plays amateur rec hockey. It looks like they'll be having the go ahead to allow back on ice rinks by beginning of July, so he can get back training again. But again, this is contingent on a whole host of things. But definitely we need to look at sport facilities like ice rinks and tennis courts and athletics tracks and, you know, all weather playing surfaces, basketball courts, a whole host of things, sports centres, and make sure the facilities are, you know, are usable, regardless of the coronavirus or not. But I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for a variety of sports. We don't. How many teams are actually going to survive this pandemic? How many sports leagues are going to survive as they are without massive structural changes? Um, that is the great unknown. The fact that in North America only NASCAR has restarted, really, or motorsport is the only thing that's really restarted fully, tells you what you need to know about the state of North American sport. The CFL might go out of business. That's the Canadian Football League, which is the Canadian equivalent of the NFL. Might completely go out of business. May cease to exist. And that employs a lot of people. People think, oh, these sports stars get paid a lot of money, and they do. And the way the sport dealt with furloughing staff, with players not taking pay cuts, it wasn't a great look. It's a PR nightmare. So when people go to me, what's my favourite sports? Yeah, football doesn't feature very highly anymore. It's the most popular sport in this country and in the world, but it doesn't feature very highly on my favourite sports list. I think it's fallen further down. I really do. I think it's shown itself a sport that has lost touch with its origins, it's lost touch with its fan base, and lots of problems with football. What else is going on in the world? Who's messaging? Lots of messages. Lots of messages. So yeah, obviously football restarted. We don't know when rugby obviously is going to restart, or rugby league. There are provisional dates in place. And that'll be interesting to see how rugby league and rugby union restart in Europe. That'll be very, very interesting, actually. Obviously, Major League Rugby is in its infancy in the US. Be interesting to see how they restart and deal with the restart over there. But yeah, but the question to do with a lot of will there be an EIHL season? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even tell you how many of the British ice hockey teams are going to be in existence by September. From the sounds of it, it's not positive sounds that are coming out of a variety of locations. It's not sounding too positive, and the growth the sport has seen, it would be a catastrophic loss if we lost so many teams. It would be catastrophic. But we have to look at facilities and how they're managed and who runs them. Should it be council run? Should it be privately run? Should there be a bit of both? Because yeah, things aren't being dealt with very well. Yeah, how I feel on that. On the side of other sports, what other sports we talk about? F1's interesting because they're trying the hub track idea, and the battle over TV rights and hosting races. F1's in a situation as well. A lot of teams in F1 could go up the Swanee. The Williams F1 team is up for sale. It's made massive losses, so F1 is in a situation going forward. Formula E is in a situation going forward. The British touring cars, I mean, they're going to have. I think they plan to come back in July at some point, but we don't know if they're going to have a season. So sport itself has to look at itself and its sustainability and its direction it takes, because some sports and some leagues have shown themselves that the structural issues or the problems they've had in place for a long time have been masked by the fact that they have been playing games and selling out stadiums, and the players have been earning big money and they're earning these revenues when actually there are massive structural problems. And you have to ask yourself the question, where's the money going then? That isn't being paid out in wages to players. That isn't being paid out in the salaries to the backroom staff. Where's all these profits going? Where are the profits going? You have to ask yourself that question, because when the lockdown happened and some of the big Premier League clubs were furloughing non-playing staff, you have to ask the question where the money has gone. Where are these massive bumper profits gone after they've paid the wages for their staff and players? Where has all the money gone? When the FA and rugby league and rugby union cricket are going, oh, we're facing massive losses this year. Okay, then where's all the profits that you've had for decades? Where has that money gone? Have you not saved any money? So sport has to look at itself and how it invests the money that it earns. Because the ECB, for example, have pumped stupid amounts of money into the 100 format, but now A isn't taking place and B is going to lose money anyway. So you have to ask yourself, is that the right way to fix the problems with cricket's viewership and cricket going forward? Where has all the money gone? It's an interesting point. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there because it's now nearly 6 o'clock. I thought I'd do a little short one. I'll do some more videos about, bits and pieces that are coming through. But for now, it's been a nice little live stream. I thought I'd just do a little one. And I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.